Okay, so
Yeah.
as you can see, I'm going to be talking about SSI education, social scientific issues, and with a focus on my concerns around personal choice as an emphasis, and my preference for social-political activism. Now, just a little bit of background. I work in the area of, in Canada, we have a part of the curriculum called STSE education. So it's science, technology, society, and environment relationship. We've seen the movement of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and often we've seen the programs in STEM apparently trying to eliminate emphases on relationships with powerful members of societies and concerns for environments. Although there are sometimes technological solutions offered for environmental problems. So with my graduate students, we have developed this little framework that shows relationships amongst STEM fields and societies and environments. So STEM fields embedded in societies and in turn embedded in environments. Now, one of my colleagues, Erminia Pedretti, has published a paper recently that suggests that this movement, STSE and if you like, STEM SE, has been going on for some 40 years in terms of educational research and publication, but not so much in terms of practice in schools, and that's another matter. So it is an ongoing project, if you like. Moving to the next slide, I guess everyone's seeing the slide that shows the controversy around the fluoridation of water. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Are you, so when I change slides, you see that?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. Lovely. So it seems that much practice in SSI education or STSE education often focuses on controversies. So this is a particular controversy around whether or not to fluoridate public water. A person may be faced with data or evidence and claims about those data, and then be asked to make personal decisions. And that's a concern that I have. I think that is a positive thing in many ways, but I think that it is limited. If you think about that particular approach where students are asked to make personal, logical decisions based on argumentation, often, I should say, it seems that approach is appropriate for a representative democracy. So I've stolen a picture from the internet to illustrate that we have our leaders who largely make decisions for us on our behalf, leaders and experts in fields, often making making decisions for the masses. So that may be fine in if you would say, a benevolent democracy, but I have serious concerns about our democracies. I think that the next slide would indicate, hopefully, that governments are actually often in associations with the private sector, indicated by the many companies on the left, such as the Burger King and the BMWs and so on and so on, often obviously have strong influences on STEM fields themselves, indicated by the graphics on the upper side of that frame, that graphic. And of course, altogether controlling financial matters, so I tried to represent various currencies, and media companies that are in association with many of these actants. But particular focus should be placed, I think, on transnational entities such as the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, I think that you'll find in many curriculum documents and other related publications an emphasis on competition among nations, but it seems to me that the competition and the power and the control is actually transnational, and so we have to begin to think in that way, in a very different way. So if you go back to what I was saying about socio-scientific issues, one effect appears to be that the private sector has, for example, often manipulated media, actually influenced scientists or STEM workers to try to change public opinion so that although 97% of climate scientists, for example, suggests that climate change is a human-generated phenomena primarily, polls of citizens often suggest that it's much less due to human actions. And it's apparent that this difference seems to be through control of the media and education through the because of the private sector influences I've discussed. Now, Ralph has done a nice job in one of his papers, 2010, describing that socio-scientific issues education seems to be emphasizing two of what he has defined as four possible levels of participation in democracies. They appear to be primarily, school systems tend to emphasize a deficit or a deliberative vision of what it means to be a citizen. And what that means in sort of lay terms, I think, is that experts, as I said earlier, largely are responsible for making decisions for the masses. And although citizens may participate in discussions, they may deliberate, ultimately the power still remains with the people with money and influence. And that's probably more my feeling than Ralph's, although I'm not quite sure about that, Ralph. I think Ralph is, yes, Ralph is suggesting that we need to move, because of what I've described earlier about transnational power, we need to move towards an education in SSI that emphasizes praxis. So that would be reflective practice. And in my work, it's more about student-led research. And dissent and conflict. We need to move towards dissent and conflict, and I think that's represented in the next slide. So our democracies, as representative democracies, I think need to be transformed into more participatory forms of democracy. And so this quote, "The only thing worth globalizing is dissent," I think is very important, because I think we're currently in a situation in which we're continuing to focus wealth. There was a recent study that showed that in 2010, something like 375 billionaires controlled the wealth of half the world's population. By 2015, that's been reduced to 62 people controlling half the world's wealth. And so we're in a serious world state financially, but also that has many, many social and environmental problems that we're facing. So my emphasis is not so much on controversy, it's on the problems that we're facing. So because of that, and how's my time?
Yeah, 5 minutes left. Yeah.
That's about right. So my particular focus in the work that I do is to encourage students to look at STSE relationships in a critical way, to examine them in terms of power. And I've been using actor network theory as a basis for depunctualizing, that is, exposing many powerful actants that control the movement of goods and services, people, and so on, power that can move and influence entities in the world. And I think I reflected that earlier to some extent in one of my earlier graphics. And then encourage the students to conduct RENA projects. So after they've been taught about some of these power relations, to encourage the students to conduct research-informed and negotiated action projects. So one of those is depicted here. Too much talking. I'm not used to talking a lot. The students conducted secondary and primary research, and the particular group chose to study student shower lengths. And this is all related to a project in which they were engaged on climate change. And they produced, from their research, posters and pamphlets, and did Twitter feeds and sent letters to politicians and companies. Now there is a video there to show a video that was produced by a group of students on the same subject, but I don't think I have time to play it. But if you have time, go back to that video, that slide, you'll be able to see an example. And there are many of these on my website. So students often produce many kinds of actions based on research after having been taught about power relationships. Now, getting the students to that stage, though, is not easy. So as you can imagine, it's not something that they would naturally search out themselves, power relationships such as transnational entities, or in fact, because schooling is so oriented towards guided inquiry-based learning, sorry about that, Barb, it seems to me that we need to teach the kids about conducting their research and teach them many things, actually. And so this framework that's shown here, which you can investigate later, is an apprenticeship in which we find out where the students are at, so students express their current conceptions. Then we teach them some things we think they need to know. And then we encourage them to conduct RENA projects. Whoops, somebody's blown up a section, yeah. There probably isn't time to explore all of this in detail. I think I'm winding down on time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you have 2 minutes left, Larry.
That's about right, yeah. So I'm just saying, giving you the big picture, and I think you could explore this. By the way, there's a paper, I've produced a paper linked to the last page, and so you can go back and read about this stuff. But just to finish the apprenticeship, the students are engaged in RENA projects, research-informed and negotiated action projects, and with some support from the teacher as necessary. And then eventually, as it's shown, in the red arrow, they're kind of turned loose and encouraged to conduct these projects more independently. And I've provided some examples there, and those QR codes will take you to some things we use for teaching and some examples of student project work. So we've had some successes with this, I have to say. Wonderful successes. In fact, there's a book coming out soon entitled STEPWISE, or Science and Technology Education Promoting Well-Being for Individual Societies and Environments. That took about 30 seconds to say. So you can read about a lot of that stuff there. But the truth is, because of global capitalist networks, the next slide, and this is taken from Stephen Ball's book on Global Education, Inc., or Incorporated. Just one of many networks indicating the transnational nature of power. Because of this power, it seems to me that, and of course neoliberalism seems to be a major aspect of this, it seems to me that the work that I do is limited. And
So time is over, Larry.
sorry.
Yeah. No, but please finish. Yeah.
Pardon me?
You can finish. Please do it.
The last slide is just to say we have actually with Chantal Pouillon in Quebec, a colleague of mine, we have developed this framework which we hope is a way that we might globalize STEPWISE. So it's a research and development project in which we engage a series of stakeholders, action research teams, schools, and with a focus on the well-being of individuals, societies, and environment. And of course, various forms of publication. But you can see that that's set up as a network. So we're using the concept of network as a basis for globalizing STEPWISE. So if you would like to read more about this, there is that paper, there is a Google link to the paper. And you can read about my work at stepwise.ca, stepwiser.ca. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Larry. No, thank you, Larry.